So, have you heard of Michael Cooney?
I spent most of my childhood in and out of hospitals, and I felt like I was an alien from another planet. But then I discovered David Bowie.
Well, he's this guy who was born with cerebral palsy. Growing up in Boston, he was sure that he was an alien from another planet. But Michael is used to being different.
It felt as if everyone was compiling a giant list called Things Michael Cooney Can't Do.
He spent his life overcoming obstacles and doing things that others said were impossible. And he did it all, simply to live his life.
It's funny how certain themes in my life seem to repeat themselves over and over again. But the difference is, I'm all grown up and I'm a lot happier.
So, have you heard of Michael Cooney? His remarkable journey has been full of music, girls, radio, falling down, electric guitars, more girls, love, heartbreak, hospitals, surgeries, more falling down, breaking the law, traveling the world, rock and roll, and redemption. This is the movie of the book, which is the story of Michael's life. And from here, anything is possible.
Michael C. Cooney. I call him Cooney, and he calls me Zimmerman. That's him. That's his voice laughing in the background, and that's one of my favorite sounds, the sound of laughter. You know, instead of going, I'm just going to introduce him. Michael C. Cooney.
Hello, David. Hello, David Zimmerman.
Hello, Michael C. Cooney.
It's wonderful to see you, sir. I miss you. You look fantastic.
I miss you. You know, it's so interesting how people meet and how they keep in touch throughout their lives. Yeah. We met at Inclusion Films, huh?
We did.
Yeah.
We did. I remember the day. I remember it very quickly. I remember I walked in.
Yeah.
And there you were. It was very.
What was I doing?
Yeah, you were talking about casting because you were doing casting for Spud for the Spud project, and I had gotten coffee, so I was a little bit late that morning. And you walked in, and so you were teaching about casting, and I thought, like, who is this fantastic, wonderful person? I didn't even get to meet you yet, and you're already, just fantastic.
Oh.
And then when we met each other, I just thought, like, oh, he's wonderful. And I had a few friends with me that day, and I remember them saying, like, oh, David, he's just fantastic.
Oh my God, you're just buttering up.
But you had a presence about you in the room.
I love presents. The interesting thing is, I thought the same of you. I thought you were fantastic. I just went, you have this, you do so much. In the industry, you're a writer, a filmmaker, a talk show host. You have your own show now.
Right, I do. And I learned it all from you because you are a person of many talents, as I try to be like you.
Oh my God.
We were doing the same kinds of things because I remember when we finally got to speak to each other on that day, I thought, like, I'm just going to be friends with, like, it was an instantaneous friendship. And I just thought, like, I'm going to be friends with him for forever. And here we are years later.
Well, did you always know you wanted to be a part of the entertainment community? And if not, when did you?
Well, I'll tell you because I didn't know I was going to be doing any of this.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's interesting that we both have done a lot of things in our lives. You know, none of this was something that I wanted to do. Similar to like the question I asked you on my podcast. They're like, how when did you know? Because I didn't know. I was really into music, and I had worked in the music industry for like 10 or 15 years before I even moved to Los Angeles.
Right.
And I was really interested in working at record labels, and really interested in being in the music world, and so I had come out here to go to graduate school and
right.
get my master's in creative writing, and I ended up writing my memoir about growing up with cerebral palsy. But all of that was kind of an excuse to move to Los Angeles, because honestly, because I knew, as soon as I knew what Los Angeles was, I wanted to live there. I was like, can I please go there now? I remember that I was like 9 or 10 when I realized what Los Angeles was. And I said to my mother, can I move there someday? And she's like, no, you can't.
What do you mean? Well, no.
Because I was such an East Coast person, you know.
Well, you grew up in Boston.
I did. So I used to go to New York when I was little, and I remember going to like Broadway in New York, and just how fantastic that was. And then I realized, after realizing what Broadway was, I realized that they do this thing in Los Angeles, and it's warm there, and I'm gonna go there someday. And so that was kind of the objective. I never really wanted to go to graduate school, honestly, or write, a book or anything. That was kind of like my excuse to come out here.
So that's how you got your mom to say yes.
Yeah, because I got accepted into school. And she said, well, and I said, I have to go now. I have to go. And then, so I finished school, and I finished the book, and I thought I was going to work in music, and music was kind of falling apart then. This was like I moved out here in 2003.
Okay.
So that was like 2007 when I finished school, and there was no more music industry. It was kind of falling apart back then. And I thought, like, what am I going to do? And there was a friend of mine who said, have you heard about what Joey Travolta is doing? And I thought, well, no, I didn't even know that there was a Joey Travolta. And he said, well, I'm going to have him call you.
Yeah.
And then he called me 7 o'clock one morning.
Yeah.
And he woke me up, and he said, I'm doing a film program for people with disabilities. I want to meet you. And I said to him on the phone, I'm not really a film guy. I'm more interested in music. I just wrote a book, and I kind of need a job. And he said, well, just come down. Just come down to my office, and we'll have lunch, and we'll talk.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be part of it, honestly. I thought, well, I'm going to go down there to see what's happening. And then he sat with me in his office for what was supposed to be 15 minutes. It ended up to be an hour and a half.
I love that.
And then he said, this is what I'm doing. And I said, well, I'm going to do it with you. And it's so funny because I never really wanted to do film. And I ended up doing film, and I ended up doing acting, and I ended up doing teaching, and I ended up doing so much.
Right.
I didn't even know on that day that I went to meet him that I was going to do all that, so.
Wow. Now, what's so interesting too, now the music part of it, what actually in music did you do when you worked in the music industry?
Oh, I worked for several different labels. I was part of the marketing team for many different labels. And actually, for a period of time, I worked for Arista Records.
Yeah. Oh,
and then I did small record labels, and I would travel all around New England and New York, going to promoting shows, and going to radio stations and to record stores, talking about different artists and saying, you should pay attention to this person. And so I learned about marketing, and I learned how the marketing world worked, and I was one of the few people, because there was a lot of young people doing it then. And I remember going to New York and going to the Arista offices, and they said, well, Michael's actually, they pulled out this piece of paper and they showed me like, this is what you've done numbers wise. You're actually selling music to people, and that's amazing. And you're gonna have a future in this, and, But I'm so glad that it ended up the way that it did, because now I'm doing creative things. I mean, that was more on the business side of it,
Right. And you prefer the creative.
Yeah. So and and I never wanted, because my mother is a writer.
Uh-huh.
My mother is a novelist, and I never really wanted to do that. I wanted to do something else that was the opposite of it. I was like, well, that's my mother's thing. And then I started writing. When I applied to graduate school, they wanted a writing sample, so I wrote some stuff.
Right.
And I thought, well, no, nobody's gonna like this, and they did, and then I got accepted into school, and I wrote how. I remember that I wrote a story about feeling like I was an alien when I was a kid, and I was from another planet, and I used to tell people when I was little, because there was no real. This was like 1974, 75, yeah. And there were really no people with disabilities out in public back then, and I used to tell people, because they used to say like, what's happening? What's your story? What's happening? And so I made up this whole story about how I was an alien from another planet, and I crashed here, and I crashed my spaceship, and I'm stuck here now.
You do know I was on that same spaceship hiding out in the back.
I did not know that until I met you.
We're from the same planet.
We're from the same planet. And I didn't also know that, because I had seen The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie, like when I was 10, and I was like, well, David Bowie, we're cut from the same cloth, because he's talking about the same thing, and so that was a big moment. So, yeah.
Oh my God. It just took me to that David Bowie song, Loving the Alien.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
Now, the book that you wrote, you made into a documentary short, right?
I did, and you're in that.
Right?
Yes, and I had to say something about that, is that, and I told you this privately, but I want to say this on here, is that you have helped me, and you and the friends that we have helped me so much kind of come into my own, because that's what the book was about. It is about trying to navigate with a disability in the world, and what that's been like for me. But I was still struggling with that when I got out here to Los Angeles, and I kind of felt like as soon as I got here, I was like, these are my people now. This is like, I felt so comfortable, because it was so, and we haven't talked about this part of it, but it was when I was on the East Coast, it was so difficult a lot of the time, because I was so different from everybody. And that was made so clear to me, that I looked different, and I thought differently, and it was just, I really felt
they weren't open to you.
No, they were not. I mean, they made, so some people made efforts, but it wasn't like when I got to Los Angeles and I got around creative people like you, and you're like, yes, we are the same. We're from the same planet. Where have you been all my life? That kind of thing, and that was wonderful. And so much of my journey since then has been like just feeling like I'm pretty okay. I'm pretty good. Because so much of being different when I was younger, and we talked about this a little bit, you and I, but so much of it is like trying to fit in when I was younger. Like, I won't talk about what it's like to have cerebral palsy. I won't talk about how I'm a little weird. I won't talk
We're
about
all a little weird.
Yeah. I'll just try to fit in the best that I can. And that was really stressful. Like when I was in, high school and stuff. And that, I had all kinds of difficulties back then. Like I was really depressed and suicidal for a lot of the time when I was at the end of high school.
Because you felt alone?
Yes, yeah, totally. And I felt like there was something really wrong with me because I had a disability. Like I felt like really, not like anybody else, and it wasn't until, you know, I met you, and I'm not saying this because we're on this together, but it's true. It wasn't until I met you and Jerry and Angela and Ati and people like that that I started to feel like, oh, okay, I'm doing pretty well here, and you know, maybe I can give myself a break, and I don't have to.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean,
myself all the time, you know.
You're saying this too, and I'm thinking, you know, we all have something. We all have something. You know, whether it's hidden or whether it's not hidden. I truthfully believe so, and people don't understand it.
Yeah.
So many.
And I'll give you a quick example because about you and I is like, I remember the first time that you said to me, let's go have dinner together. And I just thought that was so special. And I was like, I don't really know why he wants to have dinner with me, but this is fantastic. And then because it just wasn't, you know, people didn't, I mean, I don't mean to say this like, you know, I was sitting home by myself, but people didn't really want to have dinner with me. And like, you were one of the first people that said, let's go have a meal together and actually talk. And then I felt relaxed, you know?
Right.
Which is a really special thing when you can get around somebody who accepts you as you are and you can feel happy with them and relaxed and really come into yourself. That's a really special thing. But I remember that moment that you were like, let's go eat together. And I thought, oh, I don't know. And we ended up spending the whole day together that day.
I remember, and you know, I'm just hanging out with Michael C. Cooney.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, I didn't even know that story. I knew that you were a very talented artist, and I wanted to connect more because what did you write? You've written 4 films, right?
Yes, yeah.
A Place to Call Home, Zombie High,
yeah.
Santa is Real, and
Yeah. I had done a lot of films with Joey, and what was really funny about that is I didn't ever want to do that. That's the really funny thing is I was doing something that I got really good at, and I never really could imagine myself doing that. And
now you didn't want to do that, but did you shift to the thought of, wow, I like this? Or
yes, yeah. Well, because Joey said, I want to teach you everything that I know about directing.
Yeah.
And I remember that conversation, and I thought like, well, I don't really want to know. You know, I don't really want to direct, actually. You know, I'm pretty okay with what I'm doing right now. But the more that we did it together, and the more that I work with the students, the more that I was like, oh, I really enjoy this.
Yeah.
And you know, it's really kind of cool. Like, but it's never something I thought about when I was younger. I just, you know, I just wanted to be someplace warm where people were nice to me. You know, like,
what is your favorite creation so far? What you have done creatively? What is something that you go, oh, I love this?
Oh, well,
love doing that.
I honestly, I think the podcast.
It's so great. Able Cafe.
Yes. Yeah. Able Cafe, the podcast. And because I get to talk to people like yourself and just the reaction that I've gotten where it's not, because originally it was meant to be a vehicle for people with disabilities who are creative.
Right.
Because when I was teaching, you know, I heard from my students all the time, we don't have a place to go. Can you, I wish there was a place to go. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make a place for you to go where we can talk about where it's like, where we can, because I had all kinds of conversations about life with my students. Like, what is it like to date somebody? How do you ask somebody on a date? What do you do on a date? That was a big one.
Right.
You know, you know, like how do you get a job, Michael? Have you ever, like, how did you get your first job? So I would be fielding all these questions, you know, and then they thought, well, can we go someplace where we can talk about this stuff? So I thought, like, and it took me years to do it. And I told you at the very beginning, well, I'm going to do this, and it took many years for it to come about. But that was the initial thing, was I wanted to create something where people could go and talk about life who had disabilities, because I didn't have that when I was in the 80s, in the 70s. You know, I didn't have anybody to look until Jerry. Jerry was the first one.
Oh, but you turned on the TV and
yeah, and I saw Jerry Jewell, and I was like, oh, she's cool. Like she's got cerebral palsy and she's cool and she's on TV, and that was special to me. So she was the first one.
Yeah.
You know, so but I wanted to create that because my students were asking for that. But here's the interesting thing. Since I've been doing it now, I've gotten responses from people who are not disabled to say like, oh, I felt exactly like that. You know, that story that you told, I felt that same way. You know, and it's really building bridges that I didn't know that I could build. So that's really special.
Well, you're building more than bridges, my friend. You're building towns and cities and skies.
Thank you.
Now, in 2013, you got the Gateway Award.
I did. I did from the. It was a disability in film organization. So you know we're starting. I mean, I think they were defunct now, but they're starting to make inroads. We're starting to make inroads with people in film, and I didn't realize that I could be part of that.
Right.
So that was a big moment when I got that.
Yeah.
And then I remember because they had a conference call regularly that I was part of, and they would say to me, Michael, you know, we don't know if we're going to continue. This was a few years after that. We don't know if we're going to continue what we're doing, but you need to take the ball and run with it now, you know, and see what you can do.
Well, it's interesting because it reminds me of, I mean, I was so grateful that you had an awards yourself 1 year through your production company, and
I did.
And you honored me and the Push Girls and Joey Travolta. And, you know, what you're saying now brought me to think about that, how being honored is in that way, it's uplifting. And for you to get that award from Gateway,
yes.
You know, even though they might have moved on, but what they told you was so brilliant. It's like, right. Okay, you've got the ball now.
Right. And you know, in those instances, we never know that we're going to get an award. I was kind of like, really? You want to give me an award? Like, I don't understand why, but you know.
Right. I'm the same way. It's like when you told me, I'm like, what? The thing is, you're so creative. You do so much. I mean, and you travel. I mean, you traveled around the world to South Korea.
I did. Yes.
To work, to speak.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if we ever spoke about that story. I have many stories about being in Korea. It was very crazy.
Tell us one story.
Okay, so they had. I really felt like a celebrity out there because it was not, you know, they had because they had a bus. They invited a bunch of people who were involved with the disabled community. And
so they invited you.
Yes. Well, they first actually invited Joey, and then Joey said, "You know what? I have a person that you're gonna like even better than that." and he told them about me, and they're like, "Are you kidding? We would love to have him here." And I remember when we got to the airport, you know, I just felt so honored to be there because the whole idea of a person with a disability being out in the world, like that's not something that happens in that part of the world. Normally what happens, because I got a chance to travel all around, and they had rented a car for me, and I rode in the back of the car like a celebrity. And I got to go to all these events and meet all these people. Like I met the Korean Frank Sinatra.
Oh, I love it. Hey, I gotta jump back for a second. You said like a celebrity. There was no like. You were the
Thank you. But what I got from it was the attitudes about disabilities there are so different, and there's so much shame involved with having a person with a disability in your family. So there was a lot of, you know, there would be events where I would be meeting people and signing autographs for people, where people would line up. People would bring their family member who had a disability who had never left the house before. And they would say, like, here's this person with autism, here's this person in this wheelchair. He doesn't normally leave the house.
Yeah.
But I wanted him to meet you. And then I had to do everything through a translator, which was interesting in itself because it was like the Lost in Translation, like in the movie, like with Bill Murray. Like, I don't think that's what he said, because there would always be a translator with me, and then I would say like one sentence, and he would talk for like 15 minutes in Korean, and I'm like, I know that he's saying more than I just said, So, but through the translator, I was getting I was getting to hear all these stories about, this is my brother who has autism. He's really interested in film. He's never left the house before, but I wanted him to meet you.
Wow.
It was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then my favorite thing was that we went up to this Tibetan monastery.
Yeah.
And I got to speak up there, and it was not accessible at all. And then they said, Michael, we want you up there because we want you to speak about, your experiences. And they literally, there was 4 very big Korean gentlemen who literally picked up my wheelchair and carried it up this, this high, bunch of stairs, It was like, what was that thing, where they carry you, they lift you up and they carry you.
Oh, right. I know several different things. I went to 2 places where that's the thing that they carry you up, but also at the Jewish wedding when they carry the chair.
Yes, yes, I'm missing out on the deal. So they carried me up there, and then I got to speak to, these monks up there about my experiences, and it was really amazing. It was really
wow. How long were you there?
I was there for 2 weeks.
What?
We stopped in Japan, and I got to meet some Japanese disabled people, and then we went to Korea, and I was there for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So yeah.
Hey, what is your biggest joy? When I was it's changed. It's changed because when I was younger, it was music. When I had no one around me, I could take refuge in music, and I got happiness out of music and listening to the radio and finding things that I could connect to, like David Bowie and like Prince. I was a big Prince fan when Prince was around, and that stuff spoke to me, and, along with a whole bunch of other things. But now it's when you meet somebody, it's making friends. It's having friends around me. And I know that sounds similar to something that you would say. I know. I'm listening to you. I'm going, wait a minute. When's your birthday again? Maybe we're both Aquarius.
I'm Scorpio.
That's it.
I'm Scorpio.
I don't. I believe in all that, but I don't know how it all goes together.
Yeah. So, but it's really because I didn't have a lot of friends when I was younger, but now when I meet really special people and you start that friendship and you keep that friendship and you and I have talked about this before, but in this odd way when we're having these lockdowns and everything, I feel closer to a lot of people than ever before because I talk to people more now that everybody's stuck at home and stuff. So it's maintaining those friendships and keep that gives me joy. If I can say like, oh, I talked to this person today and they made me happy, and I made them happy, then that's a good day,
So I want to go back or go forward to
Okay.
the Able Cafe. Tell us why. Well, of course I heard why you wanted to do it, but what else do you want to say about that? When is it on? When is it?
We're taking a little hiatus for the holidays now. We've done it's on every platform that you can possibly find podcasts now. There's 13 episodes. We've done 13, which is amazing. You know, and you're on there. You're one of the. Actually, you're on twice, David.
Right, I'm on the Hanukkah show.
You're on the Hanukkah show. You have your own show, and then you're on the Hanukkah show. So that's special.
Well, the thing about coming onto your show is you're so inviting. It's like you start having a conversation, you forget you're on air. It's sort of like, what did I just say to the world? You know, but it's so great. And you know how it took you a while to actually do it, that you said earlier.
Right.
That also made me think about a project or two that, you know, have been percolating on the stove in my brain.
Right.
You know, that hasn't been finished yet or hasn't gotten out there completely. But the way you put your website together is gorgeous. The way you did everything, it shows that you care and you really have a focus.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you something about how we got to that point, because it has something to do with you. And I'm not just saying that because we're talking now, but it really does. You know, I learned a lot from you and from our other friends, and especially from Corey Allen, who we talked about before, because let me just say something about him, is that Corey was the person, he used to sit on the couch in Inclusion Films when he would come visit, and he would make me talk to him. And he would say, oh, because I would be, you know, running around on my walker, and he would say, Michael Cooney, slow down and talk to me for a minute.
Yeah.
You know? And then I would say, and then Joey would say, oh, he would say something about Corey to me. And then I would say, like, tell me what it was like, you know, to be on Rebel, you know, Without a Cause, or to do Star Trek, or whatever Joey had told me, you know. And he'd say, no, I want to hear about you. Tell me something about you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about Rebel Without a Cause in a second. And then he would, but he's like, first I want to hear about you. And then I would say something like, oh, you don't want to hear. And he would say, Michael, to talk to me about you. So he forced me, in a way, to talk about myself and to have some value in myself, you know. And this happened repeatedly. Like, I would be like, oh, Corey's here again. He's gonna make me talk about stuff now, you know. So, you know, but so much of that was such a learning experience for me. And when we started to do the podcast, and I got that from you too, because I remember in Auti's group that we had, where she was like, you said to me, we're going to meditate today, and I want to meditate with you. And I was like, hey, David, I don't know. I don't know about meditation. I don't know. And I was very nervous about it. And then Auti said, you know, we're going to meditate. We're going to sit with me. And this isn't actually in the film, because we filmed it. And that was such a moment for me, honestly, because it's about, you know, what you talk about a lot in the world, and what we talk about together is just slowing down and taking a breath and being in the moment and figuring out who you are and what your power is, you know? Because when I started doing that, because of you and Corey and a whole bunch of people, then I started to think like, oh, okay, I have a different perspective on things now. You know, I'm not trying to move so quickly. I'm not trying to prove myself, because it was so much about proving, like, I can do everything, you know, like I can do everything, you know. And then when you calm down and you start to think like, oh, I have things that I didn't know I had. So then when we started to do the Able Cafe, it was like talking about people's stories and people's powers that they don't know that they have. That's what it came out to be, which is completely different than what we started with, you know? So it was like, well, let's talk, you know, what is your ability? Like, what do you want to do on the, and then people would say to me, well, you got me to talk about things that I never knew that I was going to talk about. You know, that's amazing. You know, when you take that moment together,
yeah.
And you and I have done this privately. You and I have done this in our friendship.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you for that, because honestly, I got to tell you, I gave you some difficulty. I was like, David, I'm not doing that. And you were like, yes, you're doing it. So, you know, it was a big moment for me, you know?
Yeah.
It was a big moment. So that's what we do with the podcast now, is that we talk about, you know, abilities, yeah, and what people's gifts are, you know?
Well,
and you know, and that gives people a different perspective on things, you know?
I tell you, you have a lot of gifts that you share with the world, and you're such a creative force. So I'm blessed to call you a friend.
As am I, and you know, you've had a profound effect on my life, so I appreciate that.
Hey, what do you want the most at this moment in your life?
Well, a couple of things. I would like to go out and see friends again at some point. But I also, you know, that's an external thing that we have no control over. But, you know, and this is part of like what I learned is like, there are things that we can't control about the world. And then there are things that we can control. And we can control how we feel about, like, here's a big one for you that I just got. That people like you and Jerry and Ati and Angela have been telling me for a number of years now.
Yeah.
You can't control the way that people feel about you. You can control how you feel and what you do. But I made a huge mistake for a big part of my life, and that was I can control how people feel about me, you know, and you can't. That was a big thing for me to learn, is that people are going to feel whatever they feel about me. And some people are not going to like me just because they don't, or because they feel uncomfortable. And that's okay. That has nothing to do with me, you know? And once you get to that point, then it's like this huge weight is lifted off of you, you know?
Yeah.
But I can control how I feel. And to go back to your question, I would like to get better at connecting with myself.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
Because I'm good at it now, but I'm not to where I want to be, you know? Because I still have those moments, as we all do, but I still have those moments like, oh, it's, you know, where I worry, you know, about things that I have no control over, you know? And I want to be able to say like, oh, no, I'm doing fine. Everything's fine. You know, you're good, you know? So, you know, I want to get better at that.
And you're doing that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you're doing that, and it's interesting. I'm listening to you, and we learn from each other, you know?
Yeah,
I know that you said that you learned a lot from me, but whenever I talk to you, you teach me, so.
I'm glad.
As Corey would say.
Yeah. Yeah.